Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Principal Nezu raised Deku in secret. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world was not built on fairness. It was built on variables. Some variables were constants: gravity, the speed of light, the boiling point of water at sea level. Others were chaotic: weather patterns, the stock market, human emotion. And then, there was the variable known as the quirk. For 10-year-old Izuku Midoriya, the equation of his life had solved itself quickly, and the result was a negative integer. He was a zero. A null set. In a society where 80% of the population possessed some form of parahuman ability, lacking one wasn't just a disability. It was an evolutionary error. It was a stamp on his forehead that read obsolete. But Izuku had a coping mechanism. If he couldn't be a variable in the equation of heroism, he would be the observer who documented it. The mid-afternoon sun beat down on the asphalt of Muzurifu, creating heat shimmers that distorted the air. Most children his age were at the park playing tag or trading hero cards. Izuku was standing behind a police barricade, his knuckles white as he gripped a yellow notebook, his eyes darting with a frantic, terrifying intensity. "Back up, kid! It's dangerous!" A uniformed officer shouted, waving a baton. Izuku didn't hear him. The auditory input was filtered out, deemed irrelevant data. His attention was entirely locked on the spectacle unfolding 50 meters away. A villain, tentatively identified by the crowd as the Iron Jaw due to the metallic mandibles protruding from his face, was currently engaged in a standoff with two local heroes, Backdraft and a sidekick from the Death Arms Agency. Target mass approximately 120 kilograms. Izuku muttered, the words spilling out of him in a rapid, low-volume stream. Dermal armor appears to be a ferrous alloy, judging by the lack of rust and the dull sheen. High resistance to blunt force. Backdraft is using high-pressure water cutters, but the angle is wrong. 45 degrees. It's glancing off. He needs to decrease the aperture to increase psi, targeting the joints where the armor is thinnest. Why isn't he aiming for the neck? The articulation requires softer tissue for rotation, the villain roared, tearing a chunk of concrete from a building facade and hurling it. The crowd screamed. Izuku didn't flinch. He tracked the arc of the debris. Trajectory parabolic. Initial velocity, roughly 20 meters per second. It's going to miss the heroes but impact the storefront of the bakery. Property damage estimate, high. Collateral risk, moderate. The rock smashed into the glass storefront, exactly as Izuku had predicted. Shards of glass rained down. The heroes flinched, distracted, inefficient. Izuku whispered, his pen scratching furiously against the paper. They're reacting to the stimulus instead of controlling the environment. If Death Arm's sidekick used his kinetic booster on the pavement under the villain, he could compromise the footing. A center of gravity shift would neutralize the villain's strength advantage. Why don't they see it? It's just physics. Izuku felt a familiar pang in his chest. A mixture of frustration and longing. It was so obvious to him. The world was a series of interacting systems, a massive logic puzzle waiting to be solved. But because he couldn't shoot fire from his mouth or lift a car, his solutions were worthless. Fascinating, the voice came from beside him. It wasn't the gruff shout of a police officer or the frightened gasp of a civilian. It was high-pitched, polite, and carried an undercurrent of sharp curiosity. Izuku jumped, nearly dropping his notebook. He looked down. Standing next to him, peering through the gaps in the police tape, was something. It was short, barely reaching Izuku's waist. It wore a trench coat that was slightly too large, a fedora pulled low over furry ears, and a scarf. A distinct snout poked out from the shadow of the brim, twitching as it took in the scent of ozone and dust. It looked like a cross between a dog, a mouse, and a teddy bear, dressed like a noir detective. I'm sorry, Izuku squeaked, his social anxiety booting up instantly. The trajectory, the creature said, pointing a paw toward the bakery. You calculated it before the object left the villain's hand. And you were correct about the water pressure. Backdraft is currently operating at 3,000 psi. If he increased it to 4,500 and narrowed the stream to 3 millimeters, he could sever the hydraulic line on the villain's jaw mechanism. Izuku stared. His mouth opened, then closed. Why you heard that? I have excellent hearing, the creature said cheerfully. Black, beady eyes turned upward to meet Izuku's. There was a scar over the creature's right eye, barely visible beneath the fur. But more importantly, I have excellent pattern recognition. You aren't watching the fight, young man. You're dissecting it. Izuku clutched the notebook to his chest, a defensive posture he'd learned from years of Kaken's explosions. I just like heroes. I'm taking notes. It's a hobby. It's weird, I know. I'll stop. Why would you stop? The creature tilted its head. Is accuracy considered weird in your peer group? Well, no, but everyone says I mutter too much. And it's creepy. Creepy is subjective. Effective is objective, the creature countered. It turned back to the fight. Look. The sidekick is winding up for a punch. He's going to break his wrist, Izuku said automatically. The villain is bracing his left leg. He's turning his shoulder to deflect. The kinetic energy will rebound. The sidekick's bone density isn't high enough to withstand the equal and opposite reaction of hitting that alloy at that angle. Crack. A sickening sound echoed through the street. The sidekick howled, clutching his wrist, and the villain laughed, swinging a heavy fist that sent the hero flying into a parked car. The crowd gasped in horror. Izuku winced in sympathy, but the creature beside him merely let out a soft hum. Prediction confirmed, the creature noted. Response time, 0.4 seconds. Processing speed, exceptional. The creature turned fully toward Izuku now. The chaos of the fight seemed to fade into the background noise. For Izuku, the intensity of the creature's gaze was heavier than the villain's presence. Tell me, boy. What would you do? What? If you were in that equation? The creature gestured with a paw. You have no physical enhancement. You are small. You are unarmored. How do you neutralize the target? Izuku looked at the villain. He looked at the environment. His brain, usually suppressed by fear and shame, grabbed onto the problem like a starving man grabbing bread. The fire hydrant, Izuku whispered. The villain is standing on a drainage grate. Metal conducts electricity. The neon sign above the bakery was damaged by the rock. The wires are exposed and sparking. If I could use Backdraft's hose to douse the villain, reducing friction, then knock the live wire onto the wet pavement. Conductivity. The creature nodded. Go on, but the heroes would get shocked too. So, I'd have to calculate the spread of the water. Or wait. The villain's jaw. It's hydraulic. Hydraulics use fluid, if the ambient temperature changes rapidly. Izuku's eyes widened. Backdraft has a liquid nitrogen canister on his belt for emergency cooling. If he hit the jaw mechanism with supercooled nitrogen while the villain was firing his heat vents, the thermal shock would shatter the metal. Brittle fracture, the creature grinned. It was a terrifying expression, full of sharp teeth, yet strangely approving. Thermal shock. A violent, destructive, and utterly brilliant solution. It maximizes available resources and minimizes physical risk to the operator. The police finally pushed the crowd back as reinforcements arrived. The moment was breaking. Who are you? Izuku asked, the question finally bubbling to the surface. The creature adjusted his fedora. Just a principal who enjoys a good puzzle. Tell me, what is your name? Midoriya. Izuku Midoriya. And your quirk, Midoriya-kun? Izuku froze. The world came crashing back down. The equation resolved to zero again. He looked at his red shoes. He gripped the notebook until his knuckles hurt. I don't have one, he whispered, waiting for the pity, waiting for the laugh. Quirkless. Deku. The creature didn't laugh. He didn't look away. Instead, a low, chittering sound emerged from his throat. Oh, the creature said. How delightful. Izuku blinked, head snapping up. Huh? No interference. The creature murmured to himself. A blank slate. No biological instinct overriding logic. A pure processor. He looked at Izuku with renewed interest. You assume being quirkless is a value of 0, Midoriya-kun. But in programming, a null value is not the same as 0. It is a potential for anything. The creature reached into his trench coat and pulled out a sleek, white business card. He flicked it toward Izuku. It spun through the air with impossible precision, landing perfectly between the pages of Izuku's open notebook. Give this to your parents. Tell them I wish to discuss a scholarship. Scholarship? Izuku looked at the card. It was embossed with a gold emblem. The letters UA were stylized in bold red. Beneath it, a name, Nezu Principal. Izuku's heart stopped. He looked up, his eyes wide, his breath catching in his throat. Wait! You're the high spec! You're the principal of UA High! But the spot where the creature had been standing was empty. Izuku looked left, then right. The little detective was gone, vanished into the throngs of people as if he had never existed. Only the business card remained, gleaming in the sunlight. The Midoriya apartment was usually a quiet place. It was a sanctuary of soft silence and suppressed sadness. Inko Midoriya worked hard to keep it that way, creating a bubble where her son wouldn't have to face the cruelty of the outside world. Today, however, the silence was thick with tension. Inko sat on the edge of the sofa, her hands trembling as she clasped them in her lap. Izuku sat beside her, stiff as a board, wearing his middle school uniform even though it was Saturday. Across from them, sitting on a stack of 3 cushions to reach the coffee table, was Principal Nezu. Without the fedora and trench coat, he looked even more surreal. His white fur was immaculately groomed, and he wore a tiny suit with a red tie. He held a teacup in both paws, sipping with a level of refinement that made Inko feel self-conscious about her store-bought ceramic. This blend is Earl Grey, correct? Nezu asked, his nose twitching. Store brand. Steeped for exactly 4 minutes. A bit heavy on the tannins, but the water temperature was optimal. Passable. I'm sorry if it's not to your liking. Inko squeaked, reaching to take the cup. I can make something else. Sit, Mrs. Midoriya, Nezu said, raising a paw. The tea is irrelevant. We are here to discuss the variable sitting beside you. Inko looked at Izuku, her eyes welling up with tears instantly. Is he in trouble? Did he mutter at a hero again? I've told him to be careful, but he just gets so excited and, Mrs. Midoriya. Nezu cut in, his voice firm but not unkind. Your son is not in trouble. Quite the opposite. He is in danger of being wasted. Inko blinked. Wasted? Nezu placed the teacup down. The clink against the saucer sounded like a gavel strike. I observed your son analyzing a villain attack in the Tatooine district yesterday. While professional heroes were struggling to mitigate collateral damage, your son calculated the solution in under 10 seconds. He accounted for physics, material science, and psychological profiling. He did this without a quirk, without training, and without support. Nezu's black eyes bored into Inko's. The current educational system is designed for the average. It is designed to nurture quirks, not minds. If Izuku remains in a standard middle school, his intellect will atrophy. He will be bullied for his lack of genetic power, and his brilliance will be crushed under the weight of mediocrity. I have seen it happen 1,000 times. Izuku looked down at his knees. He remembered the smell of burnt sugar, Kaken's palms. The laughter in the hallways. Defenseless Izuku. I am offering an alternative. Nezu continued. I wish to enroll Izuku in a private mentorship program under my direct supervision. He will attend UA High School, not as a hero student, not yet, but as a special scholar. He will learn from me. He will learn to use his mind as a weapon far more dangerous than any explosion or strength enhancer. Inko's hand flew to her mouth. UA? But he's only 10. And he's quirkless. Izuku finished for her, his voice small. Yes, Nezu said, turning to the boy. And that is why you are perfect. You have no crutch, Midoriya-kun. A man with a hammer sees every problem as a nail. A man with no hammer must understand the structure of the wall, the nature of the wood, and the physics of leverage to dismantle it. I don't want a hammer. I want a scalpel. Nezu hopped down from the cushions and began to pace the small living room rug, his tail swishing behind him. I am a rare case, Mrs. Midoriya. An animal with a quirk. High specs. It grants me intelligence surpassing humans. Because of this, I was experimented on. Humans fear what they cannot understand, and they seek to control what they fear. A dark shadow passed over Nezu's face, a glimpse of something ancient and angry, before he smoothed it over with a smile. I see a reflection in your son. He is an outlier. The world tells him he is nothing because he does not fit the standard model. I intend to prove the world wrong. I intend to teach him that he does not need to be a symbol of peace. He can be something far more effective. A symbol of logic. Inko looked at her son. For the first time in years, she didn't see the resignation in his eyes. She saw a spark. A terrifying, desperate hope. Izuku, she whispered. Do you want this? Izuku looked at Nezu. He thought about the notebook. He thought about All Might, smiling and saving everyone. He thought about the doctors who told him to give up. Principal Nezu, Izuku said, his voice shaking but gaining strength. Can I still be a hero? Even without a quirk? Nezu stopped pacing. He looked at the boy, his expression unreadable. A hero saves people, Midoriya-kun. That is the definition. How you achieve that result is merely a matter of methodology. If you save 1,000 lives by hacking a villain's server and disabling their weapons before they even launch, are you less of a hero than the man who punches them in the face after the city is destroyed? Izuku's breath hitched. No, then the answer is yes. You can be a hero. But not the kind you see on TV. You will be the kind that villains check under their beds for. You will be the mastermind. Nezu extended a paw toward Inko. Full scholarship. All expenses paid. Advanced curriculum. And I promise you, Mrs. Midoriya, I will protect him. No one bullies the principal's personal student. Inko looked at her son's face, the tears streaming down his cheeks, but the smile, it was a real smile. Not the fake one he wore to make her feel better. She took Nezu's paw. It was soft, but the grip was surprisingly strong. Please, Inko sobbed. Please take care of my baby. I shall take care of him. Nezu promised, a glint in his eye. And I shall make him terrifying. 2 weeks later, a black limousine with tinted windows idled in front of the Midoriya apartment complex. The neighbors were peering out of their curtains, whispering. Izuku stood on the sidewalk, adjusting the tie of his new uniform. It wasn't the standard UA blazer. That was for high schoolers. Nezu had commissioned a junior version, a smart vest and dress shirt, making Izuku look like a very small, very nervous accountant. Do you have your notebook? Inko fussed, smoothing his green hair which defied all laws of physics. Your handkerchief? Your lunch? I have everything, Mom, Izuku said, though his stomach was doing backflips. The rear door of the limo opened. Nezu was inside, sitting on a booster seat equipped with a laptop stand. Punctuality is the first lesson of strategy, Midoriya-kun, Nezu chirped. Hop in. We have a schedule to keep. Izuku hugged his mother one last time and scrambled into the car. The interior smelled of expensive leather and tea. As the car pulled away, Izuku pressed his face against the glass, watching his old life recede. He wasn't going to Aldera Junior High anymore. He wasn't going to see Kaken today. He was going to the top of the mountain. The drive was silent for the first 10 minutes. Izuku spent the time marveling at the car's suspension system. Active electromagnetic suspension, Nezu said without looking up from his laptop. It anticipates bumps in the road using sensors on the front bumper. Smooth, isn't it? Incredible, Izuku breathed. You'll be learning how to dismantle it next Tuesday. But first, we are approaching the barrier. The limousine crested the hill, and there it was. UA High. The massive H-shaped glass structures gleamed against the blue sky. It was a fortress of dreams. The UA barrier, Nezu said, gesturing with a claw. Tell me what you see. Izuku squinted as the car approached the massive steel gates. It's big. Solid steel plates. Reinforced titanium alloy, probably. Look deeper. Izuku focused. He looked at the sensors embedded in the gate posts. He looked at the cameras swiveling in sync. The cameras aren't independent, Izuku murmured. They're moving in a pattern. Overlapping fields of view. Blind spot coverage is 0. And the gate, it's on a track, but the ground around it is slightly discolored. Pressure plates? Sensors for weight and quirk signature, Nezu corrected. But you missed the infrared grid. Look at the distortion in the air near the top of the wall. Izuku squinted. Oh. Thermal curtains, laser grids. Invisible to the naked eye, but they generate heat. If a bird flies through, it gets toasted. We turn it off for orientation day, of course. Bad PR to incinerate pigeons in front of the press. The gates groaned open, recognizing the limousine's transponder. Izuku felt a shiver run down his spine. He was inside. They didn't go to the main classrooms. The car took a side route, winding through the massive campus, past the training grounds, Ground Beta, the unforeseen simulation joint, the massive stadiums. This is your playground now, Nezu said. Every inch of this campus is a lesson. Physics, engineering, architecture, crowd psychology. You will memorize the blueprints of every building. You will know the ventilation shafts better than the janitors. You will know which floorboards creak and which electrical panels are vulnerable to surges. Why? Izuku asked. Because knowledge is control. Nezu replied simply. The car stopped at the main administrative building. Nezu hopped out, and Izuku scrambled to follow. The hallways were vast and empty. Classes were in session for the high schoolers. Their footsteps echoed, Izuku's frantic sneaker squeaks and Nezu's soft tap-tap-tap. They reached a massive double door at the end of the top-floor hallway. The sign read, Principal's Office. Welcome to the brain of the operation, Nezu said, pushing the doors open. The office was less of a room and more of a command center. One wall was entirely covered in screens displaying live feeds from around the campus and the city. Another wall was a library, floor-to-ceiling books on everything from quark theory to ancient history. In the center was a massive mahogany desk, and behind it, a specialized chair that looked like a throne. But what caught Izuku's eye was the table in the corner. It was set with a complex chemistry set, beakers, burners, and pipettes, that was currently brewing tea. Sit, Nezu commanded, pointing to a chair opposite the desk. Izuku sat. He felt tiny in the room. Nezu climbed into his chair. He didn't look like a cute animal anymore. In this room, surrounded by data streams and power, he looked like a titan. Let us begin with a baseline assessment, Nezu said. He tapped a key on his desk, and a holographic screen popped up in front of Izuku. It showed a complex logic puzzle, a series of rotating geometric shapes and ciphers. Solve for X. You have 1 minute, Izuku stared at it. His brain shifted gears. The shapes were a distraction. The cipher was based on a prime number sequence. 42, Izuku said after 12 seconds. Nezu blinked. He tapped another key. A new puzzle. A simulation of a traffic gridlock. Clear the traffic. 0 casualties. 30 seconds. Izuku's eyes darted across the hologram. Change the traffic light timing at intersection B to allow a left turn. Reroute the emergency vehicle through the pedestrian zone, assuming it's clear, which the sensors indicate it is, and done. 15 seconds. Nezu mused. Good. Very good. He leaned forward, resting his chin on his paws. You have a raw processing power that rivals some intelligence quirks, Midoriya-kun. It is likely a compensatory adaptation. Because your body lacks a quirk factor, your neural pathways developed greater density to handle, well, nothing. You have a Ferrari engine in a bicycle. I guess? Izuku rubbed the back of his neck. But raw intelligence is useless without direction, Nezu said sharply. And without conviction. The principal hopped off his chair and walked over to the chemistry set. He poured a dark, steaming liquid into a delicate bone china cup. He carried it over and placed it in front of Izuku. Drink. Izuku looked at the tea. It was almost black. He picked up the cup, his hands trembling slightly. He took a sip, his face immediately contorted. It was incredibly bitter, earthy, and had a strange, grassy aftertaste that coated his tongue like moss. He gagged, forcing himself to swallow it so he wouldn't be rude. Ack! Izuku coughed. It's very bitter? Nezu supplied, a wicked grin spreading across his face. Astringent? Perhaps a bit like licking a battery? Why yes, Izuku wheezed. That is a blend of gyokuro and pure matcha, brewed at double strength. It is an acquired taste. Most people spit it out. Nezu climbed back onto his desk, towering over the seated boy. The path you are choosing is like that tea, Midoriya. It is not sweet. It is not comforting. It is bitter work. Nezu's expression turned serious, the playful facade dropping entirely. To be a hero without power is to walk a path of constant resistance. The villains will target you because you look weak. The heroes will dismiss you because you don't fit their mold. Society will tell you that you are breaking the natural order. Nezu leaned in close, his scar twitching. I was created in a lab, Midoriya. Humans experimented on me because they wanted to see if an animal could have a soul. They tortured me to test the limits of my intelligence. I learned a very important lesson in those cages. Humans are irrational. They are driven by emotion, bias, and fear. They create systems that fail because they cannot account for variables they don't like. Izuku listened, mesmerized and horrified. I destroyed that lab, Nezu whispered. I didn't use strength. I didn't use fire. I used a loose screw on my cage door and the guards' predictable patrol route. I dismantled their entire operation from the inside out. Nezu gestured to the window, overlooking the campus where students were training to be the next All Might. Everyone out there wants to be the sun. They want to shine bright and burn away the shadows. But shadows always return. I am offering you the chance to be the architect. To design a world where the sun isn't necessary because the structure itself is sound. Nezu pointed a claw at Izuku's chest. So I ask you again, Izuku Midoriya. Do you want to be a hero who punches villains? Or do you want to be the one who changes what a hero is? Izuku looked at the bitter tea. He looked at the scarred mouse bear dog who had dismantled his own cage. He felt the phantom heat of Kaken's explosions, and the cold weight of the doctor's diagnosis. He stood up. He wasn't trembling anymore. I don't want to just punch them, Izuku said, his voice finding a new, steel-like resonance. I want to solve them. I want to make sure they can never hurt anyone again. I want to be the variable that changes the whole equation. Nezu threw his head back and let out a cackle, a high, manic sound that echoed off the walls. Marvelous! Simply marvelous! Nezu spun around and grabbed a stack of books from his desk, shoving them into Izuku's arms. They were heavy: Advanced Structural Engineering, The Psychology of Criminal Deterrence, Python for Cybersecurity, and The Art of War. Then your education begins now, Nezu declared. Lesson 1, Logic is a weapon. Lesson 2, Humans are stupid. Lesson 3, Nezu picked up his own cup of the sludge-like tea and raised it in a toast. Always check the ventilation shafts. Izuku adjusted the heavy stack of books, bowing deeply. When he straightened up, he tried to smile. It was awkward, and he still looked like a terrified rabbit, but there was a light in his eyes that hadn't been there yesterday. Yes, sensei! Nezu took a sip of his tea and sighed happily. This is going to be so much fun. I haven't had a project like this in years. By the time I'm done with you, Midoriya-kun, you won't just be a hero, you'll be a nightmare. Izuku looked at the screen on the wall, where a Class 1A training session was being broadcast. He saw the flashy quirks, the explosions, the ice. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel jealous. He looked at them and began to analyze. Bakugo's explosions create a blind spot in his peripheral vision due to the flash. If I were to approach from a 30-degree angle low to the ground, Izuku smiled. It was a small, unnerving smile. He took another sip of the bitter tea. It was still awful, but this time, he swallowed it without flinching. Year 1, the deconstruction of Izuku Midoriya. The first thing Izuku learned was that he knew nothing. He had spent his first 10 years believing the world operated on a binary system, hero and villain, strong and weak, quirk and quirkless. He believed that justice was a tangible force, like gravity, that naturally pulled things toward a righteous center. Principal Nezu spent the first 6 months dismantling that belief with the efficiency of a bomb disposal unit cutting wires. Justice is not a force of nature, Midoriya-kun, Nezu chirped, perched atop a stack of encyclopedias that towered over Izuku's desk. It is a social construct maintained by the threat of violence. The only difference between a hero and a vigilante is a government license and a tax bracket. Izuku, currently trying to memorize the chemical composition of 17 different types of knockout gas while balancing a cup of boiling tea on his knee, nodded frantically. Yes, sensei! Now, recite the breakdown of the tear gas compound CS. And do not spill the gyokuro. It is vintage, orthochlorobenzylidene malononitrile. Izuku shouted, sweat beading on his forehead. Synthesized by the reaction of 2-chlorobenzaldehyde and malononitrile via the noevenagel condensation, it causes burning sensation in the mucous membranes, blepharospasm, and disorientation. And how do you neutralize it in the field if you lack a gas mask? Lemon juice. Or milk. Anything to neutralize the crystals, followed by fresh air and water. Do not rub the eyes. Acceptable. Nezu hopped down, his tail flicking. But you hesitated on the chemical synthesis. In the field, hesitation is death. If you are calculating the blast radius of a villain's explosive while he is holding the detonator, you must be faster than his thumb muscles. Again. From the top. And this time, recite the boiling points of common accelerants in reverse order. This was the routine. Every day after regular school, which Nezu insisted he attend to maintain a cover of normalcy, Izuku would run to the train station, take the line to UA, and enter the black box of Nezu's private tutoring. It wasn't just chemistry. It was cryptography. It was structural engineering. It was the art of reading micro-expressions. Nezu didn't teach subjects, he taught survival. Why do we need to know how to pick a pin tumbler lock? Izuku asked one rainy Tuesday, staring at the practice lock in his hands. Heroes just kick the door down. Heroes create property damage and alert the hostiles to their location. Nezu corrected, sipping his tea. You are not All Might. If you kick a reinforced steel door, you will shatter your femur. If you pick the lock, you enter silently. You control the engagement. The element of surprise is a force multiplier, Izuku. If you control the information, you control the battlefield. Click, the lock turned. Izuku stared at it, a strange thrill running through his fingers. He hadn't used strength. He had used torque and a tiny piece of metal. He had bypassed the barrier not by breaking it, but by understanding how it was built. Excellent. Nezu grinned, revealing sharp teeth. Now do it again. Blindfolded. In under 10 seconds. If you fail, extra homework on fluid dynamics. Year 2, The Ghost in the Machine. By age 12, Izuku's notebooks had changed. They no longer contained fan art of heroes in cool poses. The drawings were now schematic diagrams. The notes were written in a shorthand code he and Nezu had developed, a mix of English, Japanese, and encryption keys to prevent anyone from reading them. He wasn't physically imposing. In fact, he looked even more tired than before. Dark circles were a permanent fixture under his eyes, a trait he now shared with his homeroom teacher's file photo, Eraserhead, whom Nezu spoke of with fond amusement. But his eyes were different. They were sharper. Constantly scanning. Today, Nezu announced, we are going to commit a felony. Izuku choked on his lunch. We're what? Hypothetically, of course. Nezu winked. He spun his laptop around. This is a closed-circuit simulation of the Musudafu traffic control grid. I have isolated it from the real network so we don't actually cause a 10-car pileup. Your objective is to turn every light on Main Street green to create an escape route for a hypothetical ambulance. You have 3 minutes before the system traces your IP address. Izuku cracked his knuckles. He wasn't afraid of the keyboard anymore. It was just another lock. He began to type. His fingers flew across the keys. Identify the port. Bypass the firewall. Reroute the signal. The system is using a rolling encryption key. Izuku muttered, his eyes darting across the cascading lines of code. It changes every 60 seconds. Crude. Predictable. Don't get cocky. Nezu warned, walking around the desk. The system administrator has noticed the intrusion. He is deploying a countermeasures bot. It's hunting you. On the screen, a red line began to trace Izuku's digital path. Block it, Izuku hissed. He opened a subroutine. Flooding the server with dummy requests. DDoS attack on the admin node to distract the bot. While it's busy filtering the trash data, I'll slip through the backdoor in the maintenance protocol. 30 seconds, Midoriya. I'm in. Accessing signal controls. Override command accepted. On the simulation map, a long line of red lights turned green in a perfect wave. Done. Trace avoided. Log scrubbed. Izuku hit the enter key with a flourish, spinning his chair around. Nezu looked at the screen. Time, 2 minutes and 14 seconds. Not bad. However, Nezu tapped a key. The simulation map flashed red. Collision detected. You turned the cross-traffic lights red, yes. But you forgot the pedestrian crossing signals. By turning Main Street green instantly without a buffer yellow, you caused 3 simulated pedestrians to be struck by turning vehicles. Izuku's face fell. I didn't account for the human variable. Humans are irrational, Izuku, Nezu said softly. They walk when the hand is flashing red. They run to catch buses. When you manipulate a system, you must anticipate the chaos of the biological component. A perfect code fails if it ignores the imperfection of the user. Nezu climbed up Izuku's chair and patted him on the shoulder. You succeeded in the hack, but you failed the mission. The ambulance got through, but 3 civilians were injured. Logic without compassion is cruelty, Izuku. Never forget that. We calculate so that we can protect. Izuku nodded, absorbing the lesson. The weight of it settled in his chest. It wasn't a game. Every keystroke had a consequence. Reset the simulation, Izuku said, turning back to the screen, his eyes narrowing. I'll do it again. And this time, no one gets hurt. Year 3, the scavenger of Dagoba, 13 years old. The awkwardness of puberty hit Izuku like a truck. His voice cracked, his limbs felt too long, and his classmates at Aldera Junior High were becoming increasingly aggressive. Bakugo Katsuki was the sun, explosive, bright, and demanding orbit. Izuku used to be the moth burned by the flame. Now, he was something else. He was a shadow. When Bakugo yelled, Izuku didn't flinch. He observed. He noticed the slight twitch in Bakugo's right eye before a right hook. He noticed the way Bakugo's weight shifted. He didn't fight back. Nezu forbade him from revealing his training yet, but he learned to step just out of range, letting Bakugo's explosions singe the air millimeters from his face. It infuriated Bakugo more than the crying ever did. But Izuku's real life began after school. Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. Once a beautiful coastline, now an illegal dumping ground for the city's trash. Mountains of scrap metal, old appliances, and tires choked the sand. To most, it was an eyesore. To Izuku Midoriya, it was a hardware store where everything was free. Physics, Midoriya! Nezu had shouted during their dynamics lesson. You have no super strength. You have no telekinesis. If you want to hit a villain who weighs 300 pounds, you cannot use your fist. You must use Newton. Izuku stood atop a pile of trash, wearing heavy work gloves and welding goggles. He wasn't trying to clean the beach. That was a byproduct. He was hunting. He dragged a rusted refrigerator out of the sand, straining against the weight. He wasn't building muscle for one for all, a quirk he knew nothing about. He was looking for the compressor. High-torque motor, Izuku muttered, wiping grease on his cheek. Hydraulic piston from that old excavator. Lithium-ion cells from the discarded scooters. He set up a makeshift workshop under the pier. It was hidden from view, shielded by a wall of old tires. Here, amidst the smell of sea salt and rust, the Chimera's apprentice began to build. He sketched the design in the sand. Problem: low physical damage output. Solution: increased density and acceleration. He couldn't punch hard. But if he had a gauntlet with a pressurized piston that triggered on impact, he could deliver the force of a sledgehammer with the motion of a jab. Weeks passed. Izuku learned to weld. He learned to solder. He learned that lithium batteries explode if you look at them wrong, singing his eyebrows off, much to Nezu's delight. One evening, as the sun set, turning the ocean blood red, Izuku strapped the prototype to his right arm. It was ugly. A mess of exposed wires, duct tape, and scavenged steel plates. It whirred ominously. He faced a towering stack of compacted trash cubes. Force equals mass times acceleration, Izuku whispered. He pulled his arm back. He twisted his hips, channeling the kinetic chain Nezu had drilled into him. He punched. Just as his knuckles grazed the metal, a sensor triggered the piston. KR chunk boom. The piston fired. The recoil shot up Izuku's arm, jarring his shoulder, but the result was undeniable. The trash cube didn't just dent, it caved in, flying backward 3 meters and toppling the stack. Izuku stood there, panting, clutching his vibrating arm. It works, he breathed. Crew, a voice said from above. Izuku looked up. Nezu was sitting on the pier railing, swinging his legs. The timing mechanism has a 0.2-second delay, Nezu critiqued. And you didn't account for the recoil dampening. If you use that in a fight, you will dislocate your shoulder after 3 swings. I can fix it, Izuku said immediately. I need a gyroscope to stabilize the impact. And maybe a spring-loaded recoil absorption system on the elbow. Correct, Nezu smiled. But for a first attempt using garbage? It is passable. Nezu tossed something down to him. It was a canister of high-grade machine oil. Clean it up, Midoriya. Tomorrow we discuss the application of high-frequency sound waves for disorientation. I hope you brought earplugs. Year 3.5. The Philosophy of Monsters. It was a quiet afternoon in the principal's office. The tea was oolong today, floral and complex. Sensei, Izuku asked, looking up from a book on criminal psychology. Why are you training me? Nezu paused, his cup halfway to his mouth. I beg your pardon? You could train anyone, Izuku said. You could train a 3rd year with a powerful quirk. You could make Mirio Togata invincible. Why me? Why a quirkless kid? Nezu set the cup down. He looked at his scar in the reflection of the dark liquid. Do you know what a chimera is, Izuku? A mythological creature. Part lion, part goat, part snake. A monster, Nezu corrected. A patchwork of things that shouldn't belong together. That is what the world sees when they look at me. A creature that talks. An anomaly. Nezu hopped off his chair and walked to the window, looking out at the students laughing in the courtyard. The hero society we live in is fragile, Izuku. It is built on the pillar of all might. He is the symbol of peace. He smiles, and the crime rate drops. But what happens when the pillar cracks? Izuku felt a chill. Cracks? All Might is a hammer, Nezu said quietly. A magnificent, golden hammer. But he cannot be everywhere. And he cannot solve the problems that require a scalpel. He cannot punch corruption. He cannot smash societal inequality. He cannot Detroit smash the ideology that creates villains. Nezu turned back to Izuku. His eyes were hard, ancient. I am training you because you understand what it means to be powerless. The strong take their power for granted. They rely on it. You have to earn every inch of ground. You have to think your way around obstacles that others would just blast through. Nezu walked over and placed a paw on Izuku's knee. I am not training a symbol of peace, Izuku. I am training a symbol of logic. A symbol of strategy. When all might is gone, the world will panic. People will be irrational. They will need someone who can see through the chaos and find the solution. Someone who doesn't need to be a god to save the day. A symbol of logic. Izuku tested the words. They felt heavy. And, Nezu added, a mischievous glint returning to his eye. It will be absolutely hilarious to watch the Hero Public Safety Commission try to categorize you. A quirkless boy who can dismantle their security systems in under 5 minutes? They won't know whether to arrest you or hire you. I live for that kind of administrative chaos. Izuku laughed. It was a dry, short sound. So I'm your prank on society? You are my magnum opus, Midoriya. Now, finish your tea. We have to discuss the physics of grappling hooks. Year 4. The graduation test, 14 years old. The UA entrance exam was 10 months away. Izuku Midoriya stood in training ground Gamma, a labyrinth of concrete pipes and steel beams. He wore a dark green jumpsuit, a utility belt filled with gadgets he had built from trash and refined with UA resources, and his custom-weighted knuckles. He stood tall. The slouch was gone. His muscles were lean, wiry, and packed with functional strength. He wasn't bulky like a bodybuilder. He was built like a gymnast. Your objective, Nezu's voice echoed over the loudspeakers, is to retrieve the payload located at the center of the labyrinth. The payload is a tin of my favorite tea leaves. You have 15 minutes. What are the obstacles? Izuku asked into his comms. Me, Nezu replied cheerfully. The line went dead. Izuku didn't wait. He moved. He sprinted toward the first cluster of pipes. He didn't run in a straight line. He moved in zigzags, breaking his silhouette. Whir! A turret emerged from the concrete. Paintball rounds fired at Mach speeds. Izuku didn't stop. He slid, the knee pads of his suit sparking against the floor. He threw a small disc, a localized EMP emitter he'd built last month. Zap! The turret drooped, its sensors fried. Lazy coding on the targeting algorithm, Sensei! Izuku shouted, vaulting over the turret. It tracks heat signatures. The EMP blinded it. That was just a doorbell, Izuku! Nezu cackled over the speakers. The floor beneath him shifted. The labyrinth began to rotate. Walls became floors, ceilings became walls. It was a disorienting nightmare designed to mess with the inner ear. Izuku closed his eyes, visualized the schematic. The gears are located in the sub-basement. The rotation speed is constant. If I jump now, he leaped blindly into the void. He fired a grappling line from his wrist gauntlet. The hook caught a beam that was currently moving upside down. He swung, letting the momentum carry him through a gap that was only open for a split second. He landed in the central chamber. There, on a pedestal, was the tin of tea, but standing between him and the tea was a massive robot. The zero-pointer from the entrance exam? No, a scaled-down version. Faster. Sleeker. Combat mode, Izuku whispered. The robot lunged. Izuku didn't block. He couldn't block 2 tons of steel. He ducked under the swing, calculating the trajectory. Exposed wiring on the knee joint. Hydraulic pressure tubes on the elbow. Izuku drew a collapsible baton from his belt. It was electrified. He waited. He baited the robot into a heavy overhead smash. The robot's fist slammed into the concrete, getting stuck for 0.5 seconds. That was all he needed. Izuku scrambled up the robot's arm like a spider. He jammed the electrified baton into the exposed neck servo. System override! He unleashed a localized high-voltage shock. Not enough to destroy it, but enough to trigger the emergency reboot protocol. The robot froze, its eyes dimming. Izuku backflipped off the machine, landing softly next to the pedestal. He grabbed the tea tin. Time? He asked. 14 minutes and 12 seconds, Nezu announced. The lights in the gym flared on. The labyrinth stopped moving. Nezu emerged from a hidden panel in the wall, clapping his paws. You cut it close. You wasted 3 seconds on the dismount. Purely theatrical. I wanted to stick the landing. Izuku smirked. It was an uncomfortable smile, the corners of his mouth twitching slightly. It was the smile of someone who had calculated the probability of failure and found it negligible. You pass, Nezu said, taking the tea tin. You are ready. Ready for the entrance exam? No. Nezu shook his head. The exam is a formality. You are ready for the war, Izuku. The war of ideologies, the return to normalcy, sort of, the last day of middle school. Izuku walked into the classroom. The air changed. For 3 years, he had been the quiet kid who disappeared after school. The teachers thought he was going to cram school. The students just thought he was weird. Bakugo sat with his feet on the desk, looking at Izuku with a sneer. Oh, Deku! You look different. Izuku stopped at his desk. He set his bag down. He looked at Bakugo. He didn't see a bully anymore. He saw a variable. Highly volatile. Massive damage output. Immense ego creating a blind spot to tactical nuance. I've just been studying Kaken, Izuku said calmly. Studying? Ha! You think reading books is gonna help you get into UA? You're still a quirkless pebble. Bakugo popped an explosion in his palm. The class went quiet, waiting for Izuku to flinch. Izuku didn't flinch. He leaned in slightly. Nitroglycerin, Izuku murmured, almost to himself, but loud enough for Bakugo to hear. Sweat gland secretion stored in the palms. Ignition source is a spark generated by friction in the epidermal layer. If someone were to lower the ambient temperature around your hands, the sweat wouldn't ignite. Or if they saturated the air with a non-flammable aerosol. Izuku looked Bakugo in the eye. He smiled that new, uncomfortable smile. You'd just be a boy with sweaty hands, wouldn't you? The silence in the room was absolute. Bakugo stared, his explosion dying in his palm. He looked confused. Then furious. But beneath the fury, For the first time, there was hesitation. "What the hell did you just say to me?" "I said good morning, Kaken," Izuku said cheerfully, sitting down and opening a book titled Advanced Game Theory. The teacher walked in. "All right, settle down. Career forms are due today." Izuku looked out the window. The reflection in the glass showed a boy with green hair and freckles, but the eyes were different. They were the eyes of a chimera. He touched the pocket of his uniform, where a recommendation letter from Principal Nezu sat. Not a recommendation for the hero course. Nezu insisted he take the exam like everyone else to prove a point, but a letter that simply read, "To whom it may concern, beware. Signed, Nezu." Izuku smiled again. The equation had changed. And he was finally ready to be the solution. 12:45 p.m. Muzutafu Underpass. The tunnel was damp. The acoustic resonance was poor, amplifying the drip of condensation from the concrete ceiling. To the average pedestrian, it was just a shortcut. To Izuku Midoriya, age 14, it was a structural vulnerability in the city's civil planning, a blind spot with no surveillance cameras and limited egress points. He walked through it anyway. It was the most efficient route. Izuku adjusted the strap of his yellow backpack. Inside, nestled between a heavily redacted history textbook and a thermos of Nezu's brain-stimulating jasmine blend, which tasted faintly of copper and ozone, was his latest project, a prototype quadrotor surveillance drone he named Icarus. He was muttering, but not the frantic, anxious muttering of his childhood. This was a low, steady stream of data processing. Barometric pressure is dropping. 1002 millibars. Probability of rain in the late afternoon, 85%. I should have packed the hydrophobic coating for the drone's rotors. A sound came from the manhole cover behind him. A wet, sucking noise. Viscosity, Izuku thought immediately. Fluid movement under pressure. He spun around, dropping into a defensive stance, feet shoulder-width apart, center of gravity low. The manhole cover exploded upward. A mass of dark, sewage-smelling liquid erupted from the sewer, coalescing into a towering shape with wide, manic eyes and a set of jagged teeth formed from solidified muck. "A medium-sized invisibility cloak," the villain hissed, his voice bubbling like tar. "Perfect." Izuku didn't scream. Screaming expelled oxygen. Oxygen was fuel. Target analysis. Izuku's mind raced, his eyes narrowing behind his bangs. Fluid body. No visible skeletal structure. Vulnerability to physical trauma, near zero. He intends to commandeer my body to hide from a pursuer. "Don't struggle, kid!" The sludge villain surged forward, a tendril of muck lashing out like a whip. "It'll only hurt for 45 seconds. Then the pain stops. Forever." Izuku sidestepped. He didn't run away. He moved perpendicular to the attack vector. "Suffocation strategy," Izuku stated, his voice calm despite his racing heart. "You intend to force entry through the oral and nasal cavities. Inefficient. If I hyperventilate before you make contact, I can hold my breath for approximately 3 minutes thanks to diaphragmatic training. By then, the authorities will have arrived." The villain paused, the sludge rippling in confusion. "What? Are you critiquing me?" "I'm analyzing your failure conditions," Izuku replied. He reached into his pocket, his fingers brushing against a small glass vial. Concentrated saline solution. High molarity. If I introduce a hypertonic solution to his colloidal suspension, it should cause rapid dehydration of the localized area. Before he could throw it, the manhole cover rattled again. "Do not fear," the voice boomed, reverberating off the tunnel walls with enough force to rattle Izuku's teeth. "Because I am here." All might burst from the sewer system like a golden missile. The air pressure in the tunnel spiked instantly. Wind displacement, Izuku noted. Velocity approximately 600 kilometers per hour. The sludge villain shrieked, lashing out in a panic. All Might didn't dodge. He simply crossed his arms in an X formation and swung downward. "Texas!" Smash! The punch didn't connect with the villain physically. It didn't have to. The wind pressure generated by the swing created a localized vortex. The sludge was blasted apart by the sheer force of the air, splattering against the concrete walls in a chaotic Rorschach test of defeat. Izuku shielded his face with his arm, bracing his legs against the gale. excessive force, he noted as the wind died down. Collateral damage to the tunnel lining is likely. Microfractures in the concrete. All Might stood tall, steam rising from his massive form. He laughed, a boisterous sound that usually inspired hope. Ha ha! Sorry for getting you caught up in my justice ing, young man. I usually clean up this city, but the sewer system is a tricky maze. All Might began to scoop the scattered villain into empty soda bottles. Izuku lowered his arm. He didn't ask for an autograph. He didn't faint. He walked over to the spot where All Might had landed and inspected the cracked pavement. You're operating at a structural deficit, Izuku said. All Might froze, holding a soda bottle halfway to his pocket. Excuse me? Izuku looked up. His green eyes were piercing, dissecting the hero. Your trajectory from the sewer suggests you were in pursuit for at least 5 kilometers. Yet you utilized the Texas Smash, a move reliant on centrifugal force, rather than a California Smash, which is a somersault variation better suited for confined spaces. The wind pressure from the Texas Smash in a tunnel this size creates a backdraft. You wasted 15% of your energy output fighting your own air resistance. All Might stared. The eternal smile faltered just a millimeter. You know a lot about my moves, young man. A fan? An observer, Izuku corrected. He pointed at All Might's side. And you're favoring your right oblique. Your posture is listing 3 degrees to the left. You're injured. Old injury? The scar tissue is limiting your range of motion. All Might's sweat dropped. Literally. A massive bead of sweat rolled down his chiseled face. This kid was terrifying. He reminded him of him. The principal. Well. Sharp eyes. But I must go. Evil doesn't sleep, and neither do I. All Might crouched, preparing to launch. Wait, Izuku said. He didn't grab All Might's leg. That would be suicidal. I have a question about your time limit. All Might's legs, which had been tense for a jump, turned to jelly. He stumbled. Time limit? You're steaming, Izuku said, gesturing to the vapor rising from the hero's skin. Not from heat, but from bioenergy sublimation. It's consistent with a transformation quirk reaching its metabolic threshold. Based on the volume of steam and the degradation of your posture, you have, what? 5 minutes left? Maybe less? All Might looked at the boy. Really looked at him. The kid wasn't malicious. He was just factual. Who are you? Izuku Midoriya. Principal Nezu's apprentice. All Might choked. Nezu? You're the Chimera's kid? Apprentice. Izuku corrected again. And if you jump now, the G-force will likely accelerate your transformation. We should take the stairs. All Might sighed. The steam exploded around him, engulfing the tunnel in a white fog. When it cleared, the skeleton of a man stood in the hero's oversized clothes, coughing up blood. Izuku didn't gasp. He reached into his bag and handed the man a handkerchief. Hemoptysis, Izuku noted. Respiratory damage. Entire left lung removed, stomach too. Toshinori Yagi wheezed, wiping his mouth. He looked at the boy with a mix of awe and fear. You're scary, kid. Nezu taught you to read people like X-rays? He taught me that secrets are just data points that haven't been correlated yet, Izuku said. Why is the symbol of peace hiding a catastrophic injury? Toshinori sat heavily on the concrete curb. Because the symbol cannot be weak, young Midoriya. If people knew, the fear would return. I hold up the sky. If I crack, the sky falls, Izuku frowned. Illogical, Toshinori blinked. Illogical? You are creating a single point of failure, Izuku explained, his voice taking on the lecture tone he used with Nezu. By centralizing all hope onto one individual, you ensure that the societal collapse will be total when, not if, that individual fails. A redundant system is safer. A network of heroes, none as strong as you, but collectively unbreakable, would be a more stable model. Toshinori stared at the ground. You sound like Night Eye. My old sidekick. He was likely right, Izuku said bluntly. But thank you for saving me. Even if the Texas Smash was inefficient, Toshinori chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. You're welcome. Now I really must get this guy to the police. He patted the pocket where the soda bottles were. He patted the pocket again. His face went pale. Young Midoriya, Tashinori whispered. Did you feel a bump when we were talking? Izuku looked down the tunnel. We didn't move. But when you deflated, the atmospheric pressure change caused a localized vacuum. If the bottle cap wasn't secured, boom, a distant explosion rocked the ground beneath their feet. Smoke began to rise from the Tatooine shopping district 3 blocks away. Izuku and Tashinori looked at each other. The variable, Izuku whispered. I didn't account for the bottle cap. Without a word, he turned and ran. Not with the frantic sprint of a scared child, but with the measured, rhythmic stride of a soldier. 1:15 p.m. Tatooine shopping district. The scene was a chaotic tableau of fire and incompetence. The sludge villain had found a new host. Explosions rang out every few seconds, orange fireballs illuminating the alleyway where the villain had cornered his prey. Izuku arrived at the police barricade, breathing steadily through his nose to regulate his heart rate. He pulled his goggles down from his forehead, a piece of gear Nezu had given him, equipped with a rudimentary thermal overlay. Analysis, Izuku thought, scanning the scene. Heroes present, Death Arms, Kamui Woods, Empty Lady Backdraft. Status, ineffective. I can't get in there! Death Arms shouted, shielding his face. The explosions are too frequent. There's no opening. I need a 2-lane road. Empty Lady complained, stuck outside the narrow alley. Inefficient, Izuku muttered. He pressed a button on his backpack strap. A small compartment opened, and Icarus, the quadrotor drone, buzzed to life. He pulled a controller from his pocket. It looked like a modified game console. Launch. The drone zipped over the heads of the stunned police officers. Hey! No civilians! An officer yelled. It's not a civilian, Izuku replied, not looking up from his screen. It's a tactical asset. On the small screen, Izuku saw the thermal feed. The center of the inferno was hot, too hot. But in the middle of the sludge, there was a cooler pocket. A human body, blonde hair. Explosions. Kaken. Izuku's heart skipped a beat. A wave of cold fear washed over him. That was his childhood friend. That was the boy who told him to jump off a roof. Emotion is a variable, Nezu's voice echoed in his head. Isolate it. Use it. Do not let it drive the car. Izuku tightened his grip on the controller. Target identified, he whispered. Hostage, Katsuki Bakugo. Villain, sludge entity. Weakness, fluid cohesion and eyes. The heroes were standing around, waiting for someone with the right quirk. They were waiting for a key to fit a lock. Izuku didn't have a key. He had a lockpick. I'm going in, Izuku said. Kid, wait! Death Arms lunged for him. Izuku threw a smoke pellet at his own feet, a trick from the ninja history books in Nezu's library. A cloud of gray dust puffed up, and by the time Death Arms waved it away, Izuku was gone. He didn't run straight at the villain. That was suicide. He ran along the wall, using the debris as cover. Above him, Icarus shrieked, diving toward the villain like a bird of prey. What is that annoying buzzing? The sludge villain roared. Distraction, Izuku said into his headset. He triggered the drone's payload. A high-intensity strobe light flashed directly into the villain's large, watery eyes. Arg! My eyes! The grip on Bakugo loosened for a fraction of a second. The explosion stopped as Bakugo gasped for air. Izuku slid into the clearing, skidding on his knees. He was 10 meters away. Too far for a punch. Perfect range for chemistry. He reached into his utility belt and pulled out 2 items, a bag of white powder and a plastic bottle of liquid. Kaken! Izuku yelled, his voice cutting through the roar of the fire. Close your mouth and eyes. Now! Bakugo, dazed and terrified, looked at Izuku. For once he listened. He clamped his eyes shut. Izuku threw the bag. It hit the sludge mass and burst open. Super-absorbent polymer powder. The kind used in industrial cleanup. Eat this! The powder coated the wet villain. Instantly it began to absorb the moisture, turning the liquid sludge into a heavy, gelatinous semi-solid. The villain screamed, a gurgling, dry sound. I'm stiffening. I can't move! Izuku didn't stop. He uncapped the bottle, a mixture of vinegar and baking soda he'd concentrated into a pressurized foam. He shook it and sprayed it directly at the villain's face, where Bakugo was trapped. The chemical reaction was violent. The expanding foam forced the sludge apart, creating a cavity. "Get out! Roll left!" Izuku commanded. Bakugo fell forward coughing, freed from the suffocating muck. The villain, now a half-solid, crusty mess, roared in fury. He formed a hardened tentacle and swung it at Izuku. "You little brat! I'll crush you!" Izuku stood his ground. He had no more gadgets. He had no quirk. He had a metal pipe he'd picked up from the debris. Calculate trajectory. Duck. Strike the eye. But the tentacle was too fast. Izuku braced for impact, raising the pipe. "I miscalculated the tensile strength of the polymer. He still has mobility." Suddenly, a gust of wind blew the fires out. A massive hand caught the sludge tentacle. "I really am pathetic," a deep voice growled. Izuku looked up. All Might was there. He wasn't smiling. His eyes were shadowed, furious, not at the villain, but at himself. "I told you I was at my limit, yet I watched a quirkless boy do more in 30 seconds than I did in 5 minutes. All Might reared back his other fist. He grabbed Bakugo with one hand and Izuku's collar with the other, gently. "Detroit!" Smash! The punch hit the air. The air hit the villain. The upward pressure was so intense it created an updraft. The clouds above the city swirled. The sludge villain was vaporized, scattered into atoms across the sky. And then, it started to rain. The crowd went silent. Izuku, dangling from All Might's grip, checked his watch. "You modified the local weather patterns," Izuku mumbled, dazed. "That shouldn't be possible without a thermodynamic quirk." The sheer kinetic energy output, All Might set them down. His steam was getting thicker. He raised a fist to the sky. "I am here," he coughed, barely audible. 1:45 p.m. The scolding. The heroes had separated them. On one side, the press was swarming Bakugo. "Amazing quirk, kid! You held out so long. You're a natural hero." On the other side, Death Arms and Kamui Woods were looming over Izuku. "Are you insane?" Death Arms shouted, pointing a finger in Izuku's face. "You have no license! You have no quirk! You could have gotten yourself killed! You were a liability!" Izuku sat on the ambulance bumper, sipping a juice box the paramedics had given him. He looked calm. "Bored even? I resolved the hostage situation in 42 seconds, Izuku said, cutting off Death Arm's tirade. "That's not the point, it is the point," Izuku countered, his voice sharp. He stood up, looking the pro-hero in the eye. "You stood there for 6 minutes. During that time, the hostage suffered oxygen deprivation and potential thermal trauma. I deployed a drone to create a sensory distraction, used a hydrophilic polymer to reduce the villain's mobility, and utilized an expanding foam agent to clear the hostage's airway." Izuku tapped his temple. "I assessed the variables. I executed a strategy. You waited for a quirk that matched the problem. If I hadn't acted, the hostage would be dead before a water-type or wind-type hero arrived. So, logically speaking, you were the liability. You were waiting for a perfect solution while the victim was dying." Death Arms opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked at Kamui Woods. He's right," Kamui Woods whispered. "Technically, I expect a citation for unlicensed quirk usage," Izuku said, picking up his backpack. "Oh wait. I didn't use a quirk. I used science. Have a nice day." He walked away. The police officers were too stunned to stop him. As he turned the corner into a quiet residential street, the adrenaline finally crashed. Izuku's knees buckled. He leaned against the wall, sliding down until he hit the pavement. His hands were shaking violently. He gasped for air. "I almost died. I stood in front of a monster, and I almost died." "Deku!" Izuku flinched. Bakugo came running around the corner. He looked disheveled, smelling of burnt sugar and sewage. "Kaken!" Izuku breathed, trying to stand up. Bakugo stopped a few feet away. He was vibrating with rage? Shame? Confusion? "I didn't ask for your help," Bakugo yelled, his voice cracking. "I didn't need you. I was fine. Don't look down on me, You damn nerd! You're just a quirkless reject. You didn't save me. I saved myself. Bakugo spun on his heel and stomped away. Izuku watched him go. He noticed the slight tremor in Bakugo's shoulders. He's terrified, Izuku realized. His worldview just cracked. The weak save the strong. He doesn't have the algorithm to process that yet. I am here! A blur of yellow zoomed out from an alleyway. All Might slid into view, striking a pose against the lamppost. I am here! You already said that. Izuku deadpanned. He was too tired for theatrics. All Might deflated instantly, turning back into the skeleton man. A spray of blood erupted from his mouth. Young Midoriya, Toshinori said, wiping his chin. I came to thank you. And to correct what I said earlier, about the bottle cap? No. About everything. I told you that you were powerless. I watched the pros stand by. But you were the only one who acted. You, the timid, quirkless fanboy. Toshinori took a step closer. The setting sun cast long shadows, framing the hero in a golden light. Top heroes have stories about their school days. Most of them have one thing in common. Their bodies moved before they could think. Izuku blinked. My body didn't move before I could think. My body moved because I thought. But the sentiment is the same, young Midoriya. All Might said, his blue eyes burning with intensity. You can become a hero. Izuku felt tears prick his eyes. Not because he needed permission, Nezu had already given him that, but because the greatest hero in the world was acknowledging his logic. I have a secret to tell you. All Might continued. My quirk, it can be passed on. Izuku's brain stopped. Variable unknown. Error. Does not compute. Passed on? Izuku whispered. Genetic transfer is impossible without reproductive biology or extreme bioengineering. Unless it's not genetic. It's in stockpiling energy matrix, you mutter a lot. All Might noted. Yes. It is called one for all. One person cultivates the power and passes it to another. I want you to be my successor. I want you to inherit my power. All Might extended his hand. It was the ultimate offer. The dream of every kid in the world. The ultimate variable to solve the equation of heroism. Izuku looked at the hand. He looked at All Might's emaciated form. He reached into his pocket. Hold that thought, Izuku said. He pulled out his phone. He dialed a number on speed dial. Principal Nezu? It's Izuku. All Might's jaw dropped. You're calling him? Now? Yes, Sensei, Izuku said into the phone. I'm with All Might. Yes, the skeletal one. He just offered me his quirk. It's transferable. He calls it one for all. Pause. Uh-huh. You knew? Of course you knew. Izuku looked at All Might. He says he suspected it for years based on the variance in your power output data. Izuku went back to the phone. He wants to give it to me. Yes. I know it sounds illogical. But, Sensei, with that kind of power output, combined with my analysis, I could be the ultimate deterrent. I could optimize the system. Pause. Nezu was cackling on the other end. Izuku could hear the tea set rattling. Condition accepted, Izuku said. I'll put him on. Izuku handed the phone to a bewildered All Might. Hello? Principal? Nezu's voice was chirpy and terrifyingly loud. Toshinori-san! How wonderful! You finally found a successor! And it's my personal student! What a delightful coincidence! Or was it fate? The probability is statistically insignificant, but here we are. Ah, yes! He has the heart of a hero. He has the brain of a mastermind. Nezu corrected. I approve of this transfer. However, I have conditions. If Izuku is to inherit this ancient, stockpiling power, his training regimen will be designed by me. You are a terrible teacher, Toshinori. You teach by feeling. Izuku learns by formula. All Might flinched. I suppose that is fair. Good. Bring him to the beach tomorrow. We have 10 months until the entrance exam. I shall prepare the spreadsheets. Oh, and Toshinori? Yes? If you break him, I will find out where you live. And I will leave a very complex puzzle in your ventilation system. Click. All Might handed the phone back to Izuku with a trembling hand. He is intense. He takes education very seriously, Izuku said, pocketing the phone. Izuku looked up at All Might. The sun had set. The street lights flickered on. All Might-san. I accept. I will take your power. Izuku clenched his fist. But I won't just be the next symbol of peace. That's your legacy. I'm going to use this power to build something stronger. Something that doesn't break when one person gets hurt. All Might smiled. It was a genuine, soft smile. I think that is exactly what the world needs, young Midoriya. 6 a.m. Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. The sun crested over the horizon, painting the piles of scrap metal in hues of orange and gold. But the beach was different now. The mountains of trash were gone. In their place sat neatly sorted stacks of recyclables, organized by material type, ferrous metals, non-ferrous metals, plastics, and organic waste. It wasn't just cleaned, it was catalogued. Izuku Midoriya stood at the water's edge, balancing on one leg atop a rusted washing machine. He was breathing in a rhythmic, controlled pattern. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds hold, 4 seconds out. Stabilization complete, he muttered. Core engagement at 100%. Standing on the sand below were two figures. One was a towering skeleton of a man in a yellow suit. The other was a small white creature sitting on a folding chair, drinking tea from a thermos. Time! Nezu chirped, clicking a stopwatch. You've held the pose for 30 minutes, Izuku. Your vestibular system has improved drastically. Izuku hopped down, landing softly in the sand. He wasn't the scrawny kid from 10 months ago. He wasn't a bodybuilder either. He didn't have the hulking mass of All Might. Instead, he was built like a coiled spring. Lean, dense muscle wrapped around a frame that had been pushed to its absolute limit. Young Midoriya! All Might coughed, holding out a towel. You have done it! You have cleared the beach! And you sorted it! The municipal waste department actually sent me a thank you letter. Efficiency is key, All Might-san, Izuku said, wiping his face. Random piling creates logistical bottlenecks for the collection trucks. Right. Of course. Logistics. All Might's sweat dropped. Even after 10 months, the boy's brain operated on a frequency All Might struggled to tune into. It is time, then, Nezu said, setting down his tea. His expression turned solemn. The vessel is prepared. The power must be transferred. All Might nodded. He reached up and plucked a single golden hair from his head. This is it, young Midoriya. The culmination of your physical training. Eat this. Izuku stared at the hair. He stared at All Might. He pulled a jeweler's loupe from his pocket and inspected the follicle. DNA ingestion, Izuku analyzed. The quirk factor is carried in the genetic material. By introducing it to my digestive system, my body will assimilate the sequence. However, the stomach acid pH is 1.5 to 3.5. Wouldn't sublingual absorption be faster? Or perhaps, just eat it! All Might yelled, his face turning red. Izuku sighed. Down the hatch, he swallowed the hair. He waited. I don't feel anything, Izuku noted. No thermal surge. No electrical discharge. It takes a few hours to digest, All Might explained. By the time the practical exam starts, you should have access to the embers of One for All. Nezu walked up to Izuku. He didn't offer a hug. He offered a small, black suitcase. Your exam kit, Nezu said. Standard issue utility belt, approved support items, and your jumpsuit. Remember, Izuku One for All is a volatile variable. It is a nuclear reactor inside a residential home. Do not flip the switch unless you are prepared to blow the roof off. I know, Sensei, Izuku said, gripping the handle of the case. I have a plan. I calculated the structural integrity of my bones versus the output of the quirk. If I use it at 100%, my limbs will shatter. I need to restrict the flow. But since I haven't had time to test the regulation, you won't use it, Nezu finished. Unless the equation leaves you no other choice, Izuku nodded. I'll pass the exam my way. The Nezu way, Nezu grinned, his scar stretching. Then go. Show them that the most dangerous thing in the world isn't a quirk. It's a student who did the reading. 8:30 a.m. UA High School gates. The atmosphere was electric. Hundreds of students from across the country swarmed the entrance, a sea of black uniforms and nervous energy. Izuku walked through the crowd. He felt calm. For years, he had imagined this moment. He thought he would be hyperventilating. He thought he would be terrified. But after spending 10 months with a creature who played 4D chess for fun and a hero who coughed up blood daily, a high school entrance exam felt manageable. Variable count high, Izuku noted, his eyes scanning the crowd. Quirk variety, extensive. Psych profiles, high anxiety. Out of my way, Deku! The familiar explosion of sound came from behind him. Bakugo stomped past, his shoulders hunched aggressively. Good morning, Kaken, Izuku said politely. Your cortisol levels seem elevated. Have you tried diaphragmatic breathing? Bakugo stopped. He vibrated with rage. Don't psychoanalyze me. I'm gonna crush this exam. I'm gonna get a score so high they'll have to invent a new number system. That would be mathematically redundant, Izuku said. Base 10 is perfectly sufficient for— Shut up! Bakugo stormed off. Izuku watched him go. He's nervous, Izuku realized. He perceives me as a threat now. Interesting. As Izuku took a step forward, his foot caught on a loose paving stone. Tripping hazard. Center of gravity shifting forward. Impact imminent. He prepared to tuck and roll. Suddenly he stopped falling. He was floating. Whoa! Are you okay? Izuku looked around. A girl with a round face and brown bobbed hair was touching his shoulder. I used my quirk to stop you, she said, smiling brightly. Sorry I didn't ask first. But it's bad luck to fall on exam day, right? She released him, and gravity returned. Izuku landed on his feet. Contact-based gravity negation, Izuku's mind raced. Removal of mass? No, removal of gravitational pull. Does it affect inertia? Does it have a weight limit? Nausea suggests inner-ear disruption as a drawback. Thank you, Izuku said, bowing slightly. That was efficient. You saved me 1.5 seconds of recovery time, the girl blinked. Sure. Good luck. She ran off toward the entrance. Izuku adjusted his backpack. Friendly. Optimistic. Useful utility quirk. She'll do well in rescue scenarios. He walked into the building. He was ready. 9 a.m. The written exam. The lecture hall was silent, save for the scratching of pencils. Izuku sat in row 4, seat 12. He looked at the test booklet. English. Mathematics. History. Hero law. General science. He picked up his pencil. Question 1. In the event of a villain attack involving a Class B hazardous material, what is the legal radius for civilian evacuation according to the revised Hero Public Safety Act of 21XX? Izuku smiled. Nezu had made him memorize the Safety Act backwards last Tuesday while dodging tennis balls. Answer: 500 meters, unless the wind speed exceeds 20 kilometers per hour, in which case the downwind sector must be evacuated to 2 kilometers. Question 5. Calculate the tensile strength required for a support beam to hold a 5-ton load at a 45-degree angle. Child's play. Izuku's pencil moved in a blur. The questions weren't easy. UA was the top school in the country for a reason, but to Izuku, they were comforting constants. There was no ambiguity here. No gray areas. Just right and wrong. He finished the English section in 10 minutes. Math in 15. At the front of the room, President Mike was proctoring. He watched the green-haired boy flip the page with a rhythmic snap. That's the principal's kid, Mike thought behind his shades. Nezu said he's a high-speed processor. He wasn't kidding. He's eating this test alive. Izuku put his pencil down. He checked the clock. 40 minutes remaining. He looked around. Other students were sweating, erasing furiously, staring at the ceiling. Izuku opened his booklet again and began to proofread. Not for answers, but for grammar. He found a typo in question 32. He circled it, and wrote a polite note to the exam board in the margin. Correction. The atomic weight of tungsten is 183.84, not 183.85 as stated in the prompt. I have adjusted my calculation accordingly. 10 a.m. Orientation Hall. Everybody say hey. President Mick's voice amplified through the auditorium, loud enough to vibrate the feelings of the students in the back row. Silence. Tough crowd. Mike shrugged. All right, examinees. Let's get to the main event. The practical exam. On the massive screen behind him, 8-bit graphics of robots appeared. You'll be conducting 10-minute urban mock battles. You can bring whatever you want, gear, quirks, lucky charms. You'll be dropped into different battle centers. Izuku looked at his exam card. Battle Center B. He glanced at Bakugo's card next to him. Battle Center A. They split students from the same school, Izuku noted, to prevent cooperation and force adaptation to new team dynamics. There are 3 types of foe villains in every center, Mike yelled. 1-pointer, 2-pointer, 3-pointer. The more points, the harder the bot. Your goal? Shred M. Rack up that high score. Excuse me. A hand shot up in the middle of the auditorium. A tall boy with glasses and blue hair stood up stiffly. May I ask a question? Hit me, listener. On the printout, there are clearly 4 types of villains listed. Such an error would be shameful for a top-tier institution like UA. We are here to be molded into exemplary heroes. The boy spun around and pointed a finger directly at Izuku. And you! The one with the curly hair. Izuku blinked, pointing at himself. You've been muttering this entire time. Sonic resonance, structural damping, decibel limits. It's distracting. If you're here on a sightseeing trip, please leave immediately. The auditorium fell silent. Eyes bored into Izuku. Bakugo snickered. Izuku stood up slowly. He didn't look embarrassed. He looked disappointed. I was calculating the acoustic properties of the room, Izuku said, his voice carrying clearly without shouting. Present mixed directional speaker quirk is impressive, but the baffling on the west wall is insufficient, causing a 0.4-second echo delay. I was muttering about how to adjust his frequency to eliminate the feedback loop. Izuku adjusted his tie. Furthermore, if you are focusing on my muttering rather than the briefing, you are missing critical data. The 4th robot is clearly listed as a 0-point obstacle. In game design, a 0-value enemy is typically a hazard to be avoided, not a target to be destroyed. It's an environmental trap. Asking about it wastes time. Silence again. But this time, it was stunned. The blue-haired boy, Tenya Ida, stared, his mouth slightly open. I see. Okay. President Mike shouted, breaking the tension. The listener is right. The 4th bot is the 0-pointer. It's huge, it's nasty, and it's worth nothing. Avoid it like a bad blind date. Izuku sat down. Damn nerd, Bakugo whispered, but there was no heat in it. Just a begrudging recognition. 10:45 a.m. Battle Center B gates. The massive metal doors of Battle Center B loomed over the crowd. The students were stretching, psyching themselves up. Some had mutations, claws, wings, extra arms. Others were emitting smoke or sparks. Izuku stood at the front. He wore a dark green utility jumpsuit with reinforced knees and elbows. Around his waist was a yellow utility belt containing a grappling hook, smoke pellets, and a few tools. On his hands were the high-density weighted knuckles he built at the beach. He wasn't warming up his muscles. He was warming up his eyes. He scanned the cityscape beyond the gate. Urban environment. 3 main avenues. Numerous alleyways. Verticality is an option. Hey, a voice said. It was the gravity girl. She looked nervous. You're the boy who fell, right? And the one who spoke up in the hall? That was amazing. I'm Ochako Uraraka, Izuku Midoriya, he replied. You should tighten your left boot. If you're reducing your gravity, your traction will be compromised. A loose boot could result in a sprained ankle upon landing. Uraraka looked down. Oh. You're right. Thanks. Before she could say more, a loud buzzer sounded. And start. President Mick's voice blared from the towers. The students hesitated. Izuku didn't. The moment the sound wave hit his ears, he was moving. He burst forward, leaving the confused crowd behind. What are you waiting for? There are no countdowns in real battles. Follow that kid, the stampede began. 10:47 a.m. The urban zone. Izuku ran down the main street. A 1-pointer, A one-wheeled robot with long arms rolled out from behind a building. Target acquired! The robot chirped mechanically. Izuku didn't stop. He analyzed the design instantly. Model 1. Single wheelbase. Gyroscopic stabilization. Exposed sensor array on the head. Most students would punch it. Izuku slid. He dropped to his knees, sliding on his reinforced pads. As he passed under the robot's arms, he lashed out with a small, specialized tool, a high-voltage taser rod. He jammed it into the robot's exposed axle. Zap! The gyroscope failed. The robot wobbled and crashed into the wall. Izuku didn't wait to see it explode. He was already moving. Points are irrelevant, Nezu had told him. The test claims to measure combat ability, but the hidden metric is situational awareness. Anyone can break a toy. Can you dismantle the system? Izuku turned into an alleyway. He wall-jumped, grabbing a fire escape ladder. He pulled himself onto the roof. From this vantage point, he could see the battlefield. Smoke was rising. Students were engaging robots in the streets. Inefficient, Izuku muttered. They're fighting them one by one. It's a war of attrition. I need a force multiplier. He spotted a cluster of 3-pointers, massive, tank-shredded behemoths, blocking an intersection. Laser blasts were pinning down a group of students. Izuku ran across the rooftops. He reached the building overlooking the intersection. He didn't jump down to fight. He looked for a utility box on the roof. Standard urban infrastructure. The robots are powered by internal batteries, but they are receiving targeting data from a local network to coordinate their attacks. If I can sever the link. He found a signal repeater box on the corner of the roof. He pulled a screwdriver from his belt. Screw 1. Screw 2. Panel off. He plugged a small handheld device into the maintenance port. It was a crude signal jammer he'd built from a microwave and a radio. Frequency 2.4 GHz. Broad spectrum noise. Initiate. Below him, the 3-pointers froze. Their heads spun wildly. Connection lost. Searching for host. Searching. The robot stopped firing. The pinned students, including a guy with a laser navel, seized the opportunity and blasted the stationary targets. Izuku smiled. He didn't get the kill points. He didn't care. Technically, I assisted. That falls under support/rescue. He moved on. 10:52 a.m. The observation room. In a dark room lined with monitors, the UA staff watched the chaos. This year's crop is spirited, Midnight commented, licking her lips. Lots of destructive quirks. That explosion kid in Center A is a beast, Cementos noted. But a bit reckless. Principal Nezu sat in the front row, his feet dangling. He was watching a specific screen. What about this one? Eraserhead asked, pointing at a monitor in Center B. The green one. He hasn't destroyed a single robot directly. He's tampering with the infrastructure. On the screen, Izuku was seen opening the back panel of a 2-pointer while it was distracted by another student. He flipped a switch, and the robot powered down instantly. He found the kill switches. Power loader groaned. I told you we should have welded those panels shut, Principal. Nonsense! Nezu cackled. In the real world, machines have maintenance hatches. If a hero is smart enough to turn the villain off rather than punching him, that is a victory. He is exploiting the design flaws. It is brilliant. He has 0 villain points. Vlad King grunted. He'll fail, will he? Nezu sipped his tea. Look at his rescue points. Every time he disables a robot or jams a signal, he saves other students from taking damage. His assists are off the charts. But let's see how he handles the true test. Nezu pressed a large red button on his console. Release the Leviathan. 10:55 a.m. The 0-pointer. The ground shook. It wasn't a vibration. It was an earthquake. Buildings groaned and glass shattered as a shadow engulfed the main street. Izuku stood on a rooftop, freezing. The 0-pointer was colossal. It was taller than the buildings. It was a moving fortress of green metal, crushing everything in its path. Targets acquired. Eliminate. The voice was so loud it felt like a physical blow. Below, the students panicked. Run! It's the 0-pointer! There's no points for that thing! Let's get out of here! The street cleared instantly. Everyone ran away from the monster. Logic dictated retreat. Survival probability, 0% if engaged. Tactical value, 0. Recommended course of action, egress via the eastern alleyway. Izuku turned to run. He had passed the test. He had disabled 12 robots manually and assisted in the destruction of 20 more. He was safe. Ow! A cry of pain. Izuku stopped. Variable. He looked back. In the middle of the ruined street, obscured by dust, Ochako Uraraka was trapped. A piece of rubble from a destroyed building had pinned her leg. She was struggling, her face pale with terror. The zero-pointer loomed over her. Its massive tank treads grinding the pavement. It raised a metal fist the size of a bus. Logic screamed, "You cannot stop it. It weighs 400 tons. You are one boy." Izuku's body ignored the logic. He didn't think about Nezu's lessons on self-preservation. He didn't think about the entrance exam score. He remembered the feeling of being powerless. He remembered the sludge villain. He remembered the look in Uraraka's eyes when she saved him from tripping. "She helped me." Calculations be damned. Izuku leaped from the roof. He hit the ground running. He wasn't running away. He was running toward the monster. "One for all," Izuku whispered. The power lay dormant in his stomach, a swirling knot of heat. He had never used it. He didn't know how to control it. Nezu had warned him, using this power without regulation is like firing a cannon from a canoe. "I don't need to survive this unharmed," Izuku decided. "I just need to save her." He reached the girl. "Midoriya-kun?" she gasped. "Run, not an option," Izuku grunted. He looked up at the robot. It was bringing its fist down. Izuku bent his knees. He channeled the heat. He didn't let it flood his whole body. He knew that would make him explode. He tried to push it, somewhere. Legs. Just the legs, he screamed. Red veins of energy crackled across his skin. His shoes groaned under the pressure. Smash! He launched himself upward. The concrete beneath him shattered into powder. He flew. He didn't just jump, he was a projectile. He soared past the robot's face. He was eye level with the sensors. "I need to stop it. Punching it will break my arm. But if I don't punch it hard enough, it won't stop." He clenched his right fist. He felt the bones creaking. The power of 8 generations of heroes flooded his arm. "I can't handle 100%. But I can't use 0%. He recalled Nezu's voice. "Find the weak point." The robot's neck. There was a seam. A rotational joint. Izuku swung. Detroit. He didn't aim for the armor plating. He aimed for the gap. Smash! Contact. The impact was deafening. The air pressure exploded outward, shattering the windows of every building in a 3-block radius. Izuku felt his arm snap. It was a sickening, wet sound. Pain, white and blinding, shot through his nervous system. But the robot. The head was ripped clean off its shoulders by the force of the blow. The massive body tilted backward, unbalanced by the kinetic energy. It crashed to the ground with an earth-shattering boom, missing Uraraka by meters. Izuku hung in the air for a second, suspended in the dust cloud. His right arm was purple, dangling uselessly. His legs felt like jelly. Gravity, he realized. "I'm falling. Terminal velocity." He plummeted. "I have one arm left. If I use a grappling hook, the sudden stop will rip my shoulder out. If I land, I die." He squeezed his eyes shut. "Think. Think." Slap. A hand touched his cheek. Suddenly, the world slowed down. He was floating. "Release!" Uraraka, pale and vomiting, released her quirk. Izuku dropped the last 3 feet, landing on the pile of rubble. He lay there, staring at the sky. His arm was screaming. His legs were numb. "Time's up!" the buzzer sounded. Izuku let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "Inefficient," he whispered, tears of pain leaking from his eyes. "But effective." 11:15 a.m. The cleanup. Recovery girl hobbled over to where Izuku lay. "Oh dearie me," she tooted. "You really did a number on yourself. A comminuted fracture of the humerus and radius. And both legs are fractured from the launch." She kissed his forehead. Green light enveloped him. The pain receded to a dull ache, replaced by intense exhaustion. "Principal Nezu is going to have a fit," Recovery girl sighed. He told me to watch out for the one with the death wish. I assume that's you? I calculated the risk. Izuku mumbled, his eyes drooping. It was the only variable that resulted in a save. Hush now. Sleep. 1 week later. The Midoriya apartment. Izuku sat at his desk. His arm was in a cast. Recovery girl had healed the worst of it, but the bones needed time to set properly. A letter sat on the desk. The wax seal bore the UA emblem. Inko was pacing outside the door, muttering anxiously. Izuku took a deep breath. He tore the envelope open. A metal disc slid out. Hologram projector. It activated. All Might appeared. He was wearing a yellow suit that was slightly too large for his skinny form. Wait, no, he puffed up into buff form for the camera. I am here! As a projection, All Might coughed, trying to maintain the smile. Young Midoriya! You took the exam! And you passed the written portion with a perfect score! Nezu won't stop bragging about it. It's actually quite annoying. All Might cleared his throat. But the practical! You had 0 villain points! 0! You spent the whole time hacking robots and flipping switches! The judges were confused. Izuku's heart sank. I failed. I focused too much on strategy, and not enough on combat. However, All Might leaned into the camera. A hero's job is not just to destroy villains. It is to save. And you, young Midoriya, risked everything to save that girl. You found the hidden metric of the exam. A scoreboard appeared on the hologram. Villain points 0. Rescue points 60. 60 rescue points. A passing score on its own. But wait! There's more! The screen flickered. Nezu's face appeared in the corner. Technical exploitation points. Nezu chirped. For discovering the shut-off switches, jamming the comms network, and generally making a mockery of my robot army. 40 points, total score, 100. Welcome, Izuku Midoriya! All Might shouted, extending a hand. This is your Hero Academia! The hologram faded. Izuku sat there in the silence. Tears streamed down his face. He looked at his broken arm. He looked at his notebooks. He picked up his phone and typed a message to Nezu. Subject, result, body, variable calculated. Success confirmed. Next time, I will aim for the neck joint with more precision. The repair bill for the 0-pointer must be high. Sorry. A reply came instantly. From Nezu. Body, don't apologize. I have the budget. Prepare yourself, Izuku. Class 1A is going to be a fascinating experiment. Izuku smiled, wiping his eyes. The variable had entered the equation. And the equation would never be the same.